I'm Dr. Mark Sue, and welcome to the Functional Medicine Reality Podcast. Join me and our community weekly as we bring you unfiltered health from inflammation to longevity. Real stories, real people, real solutions. Experience real-life health changes from both patients and practitioners, and learn how to turn cutting-edge information into real results in your own life so you can feel better, live longer, live healthier, and be confident and clear in your healthcare choices. Let's get real and get results. Welcome again to the Functional Medicine Reality Podcast. I'm Dr. Mark Sue. This is MaryJo Anderson. This is our first chat post MaryJo, you sharing your three-part story of going through a lot of travail, a lot of challenge, a lot of suffering, difficulty, but with a message of hope that healing can be and often is achieved. But work, and there's a lot of that journey there. There's a lot of pieces to that. But here we are, we're shifting. And so I think today we're going to talk about alcohol. Okay by you? As we like to joke with our family, my brother-in-law, as he likes to call it, booze.
Booze, yeah.
It's booze, we're boozing it.
We're going to talk about booze today.
I think so.
I'm excited to talk about booze. I am, oddly enough.
So let's start with, why are we talking about alcohol? Why are we talking about booze? How did this come? How did we decide this needs to be brought to the forefront? Why?
I think you and I had talked about it a couple times prior to this conversation, but it's a conversation that comes up so frequently in my life because I'm such a social person. Okay. And so I'm in a lot of social with my family, with friends, just in a lot of social settings all the time. I always have been. And so the conversation is always brought up because I don't drink and I haven't drank in 10 years. It's been 10 years. But I really started pushing away from it when I was pregnant with Jackson, which was 19 years ago.
Okay.
So for being a very social person and it being such a socially accepted thing in our world, it has always been like a little bit of a predominant conversation in my life, alcohol. And so I'm just excited to like have a conversation with you about it and share it more on a broader scale with my community and your community, because I think it's super enlightening and inspiring in many ways to have a tough conversation about alcohol.
Yeah. So when we chatted about it before, it was I think it was kind of haphazard. It wasn't like intentional. I don't even remember how it came up. Do you have any recall?
I don't think so.
Because to me, that's almost an interesting reflection on what you just said. Like you said, I'm in these conversations all the time and I'm thinking, yeah, we kind of just randomly talked about it, but I can't even remember why. Like it's that.
I think it was if I really think about it, I think it was at my home. I could be wrong. Does this ring a bell? I think it was at my home when we were having a social gathering with all the people that are in our kids' community. And I think something was said either after the aftermath of the gathering. I don't know. I think it was piggybacking off of something like that.
Okay.
But yeah.
It's been more than once.
Yes.
I remember us having a chat in your driveway once when it was just us, but I can't remember how that came up. And then it was more like, hey, that's something like, what do you think? Yeah. What do you think about that? Yes. And then we end up chatting about that, right? So, all right. So how about we start with what are a couple of your more recent, one or two of your more recent experiences on how this came up and why it, an example of how it's a somewhat recurring or frequent experience for you of conversation or point of focus or whatever. Is that a fair starting point?
Of course. Yeah, I think that's a great starting point. And it's funny because it's hard to pinpoint exactly which situation I've been in because I have been in so many different ones. My most recent one was I was sharing with you earlier last weekend when I was in Colorado visiting my son Jackson, who was a freshman and who is part of a fraternity. And it was like a mother-son weekend full of different social events. So you can only imagine that being back in a college atmosphere around in a fraternity with my son who's a freshman on campus and exposed to so much, what that really looks like. I can't imagine what that looks like. I'll roll it out for you. But it was wild and crazy 3 days, things that I participated in, but the drinking aspect of those 3 days, I don't participate in. But the social gatherings that they had, I was there, I was present, I was with Jackson, I was with many other moms, and the conversation around alcohol came up because, yeah, everybody's drinking, and it's a very highly, it's a place where that's what's being done.
It's not a dry frat.
No, it's not a dry frat. They have those.
I don't think
they
so.
Might.
I can't imagine.
They might.
You think so?
They might. I think every frat and every college is so different, but I hope that they do. Because that would be a pretty positive experience. Not that this is a negative experience that I was in, but it was something that I am familiar with because I have experienced fraternities and college life and all those things. But being sober, and I choose to use that word because there was a time in my life where I did drink and drank excessively, socially, in other ways. And so this is just the other spectrum of it where I'm completely sober and very aware of my setting and where I'm at.
So can we go back to that a little bit?
Yeah,
I mean,
of
so
course.
going back in time a little bit, right? We'll come back to the Colorado experience,
Yes.
perhaps.
Yeah.
But so let's just go to what made you, was it intentional 19 years ago
Mm-hmm.
when you were first pregnant?
Mhm.
Was the pregnancy the reason, which is common,
Mhm.
I dare say, project out.
Mhm.
That's probably not uncommon that
Mhm.
women are they're making some choices that are a little bit more intentional,
Mhm.
in thinking about getting pregnant or being pregnant.
Mhm.
Right? Was that the reason or something else happened? And then secondly, why then did you basically cut that out around 10 years ago, you say?
It's funny because I can go back even further than 19 years. And I always love to say this and share this when I am in conversation about alcohol, but I can always remember at an early age because I was exposed to it. The city that I grew up in was definitely like a very common thing that people drank socially and partied at a very young age. But I didn't grow up in a household where it was super predominant between either parent. But I was exposed to alcohol or introduced to alcohol at a very early age. I had two older sisters who definitely experimented and did all these things. So as early as 14 and 15, I was exposed and introduced to alcohol, right? But I can always remember it not feeling, not just because I wasn't at the legal age, but I can always remember feeling that it didn't serve me.
Okay.
It didn't make me feel good. It didn't feel
Even as a teenager.
Even as a teenager. Didn't love it. Didn't feel like I needed it. I was a very extroverted of a person. I always have been since I was a little kid. So I always recall like not needing it, not enjoying it, not feeling completely comfortable around it, but doing it anyways to fit in. And so,
can I ask you, did you ever talk about that at that age with your sister or
no,
somebody else?
Conversation at 15, 16, 17, 18 was never, it was about fitting in and doing what.
But you had awareness of that.
I had awareness of it. I always felt like, there's always a joke, and I'd love to ask you about this too, because I remember being, opening one, taking a sip, and then just putting it down and never going back to it, never finishing.
You said that didn't happen.
No, that's how I treated alcohol.
Oh, I see.
From early on, I can remember just being like, this wasn't something I enjoyed. And so I'd have like a sip or hold a can just to fit in or whatever.
So I was going to ask you, did you feel like it was, did you observe anybody else doing that, or was it just you?
Yeah, I just, just my only
Just
observation of myself. But fast forward to when I was pregnant with Jackson, 19 or going on 20 years ago when I was pregnant with Jackson, I can remember, initially knowing that alcohol was the first thing that needed to go for pregnancy. And I was always just drinking.
For the sake of being pregnant.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Always just prior to that, always just drinking at like a social level. Yeah. And that was it.
So it really wasn't, because, I've never asked you before, but dare ask, it's never been what you consider problematic for you.
Right.
It never been.
Right.
Okay.
No.
So even coming from a place where it wasn't causing dysfunction in your life,
right.
You still were like, from teenage years, you were just thinking it's not a necessary thing for me.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I did have dysfunction around me. One of my sisters had a substance abuse issues. It wasn't that I was completely alert to it, but I did recognize excessive drinking through a sister of mine and things that were happening that didn't always feel right either. So I can go back to those memories and thinking, there was a lot of feelings around alcohol. It wasn't serving me. I didn't enjoy it. I saw people all around me kind of abusing it or utilizing it in different ways that just didn't feel completely right to me. So that was my first initial experience with it. And fast forwarding to when I was pregnant with Jackson, it is something that I cut out of my life pretty quickly. Upon realizing that I was pregnant, and kept it out of my life for the first few years of having Jack and Reese.
And so then how do you define the difference when you say roughly 10 years ago, then it was really just haven't drinking alcohol in 10 years? Like why the more definitive change there? And because it sounds like it wasn't like a humongous shift of one going over the line.
Right. So
drinking that much to begin with.
I wasn't drinking that much to begin with. I always kind of knew in the back of my head that it wasn't serving me. It didn't make me feel good. I didn't really truly need it in order to be social. So 10 years ago, and this ties into my Lyme journey and the discussions that we've had about that, but 10 years ago when I started feeling symptoms and didn't know what they were, anything that didn't make me feel well or contribute to me feeling well was an immediate no. There was most days for many years when I was initially sick that I couldn't even really get out of bed most days. So it was like I wasn't gonna, contribute to not feeling well by drinking alcohol, being hungover, or feeling just not well. And that was one of the things that was like, oh gosh, this is easy. There was so many different things that I cut out of my life, but alcohol was an immediate, like, this can't be part of the life.
Yeah. So close to 20 years ago, it was more for someone else.
Yes.
Your son being pregnant. And then 10 years ago, it was for you.
Yes. Yeah. And it's always been a very positive experience. Like every time I've leaned into it, it always feels like it's
the not drinking.
Yeah, not drinking. Okay. Yeah, it's always felt like, yeah, this feels really right. And again, it goes back to as when I was a young teenager, like, yeah, I've always felt that way.
Okay.
We've talked about reflection. It's like when you just put all these pieces together about your life and your story and what's always felt right and not felt right. And that is one of the things that I'm like, yeah, this makes total sense. This feels really good all these years later to be sitting here and having this conversation with you. And so
for you, the alignment was both physical and I don't know, call it mental, emotional, or just internal value. I'm not even quite value. Well, maybe a little bit of values. I don't know, a couple of different levels though. The alignment is on more than one level. Line.
I agree. Absolutely. Can I ask you what your first experience with alcohol was? No, I can't.
No, I'm just kidding.
You're not ready for that question.
No, so I'll say, so I think I mentioned to you before, I almost feel weird saying it, but Jessica and I neither of us have ever been drunk. So I grew up, so first of all, the background for me, I have vivid memories as probably in high school. I don't think it was earlier than high school. My dad having a beer, sitting there like, try some. Like literally at dinner saying, try some, right? It was either Coors or Pabst or something, okay? It was probably Coors. He liked Coors best, okay? And I mean, did I try some? Yeah. It was disgusting to me. I just didn't like it, right? So it was just natural for me. I've never liked beer. I still don't like beer. I just can't relate to it. So it just is what it is. As far as the college experience, I was just sheltered growing up, I think, for multiple reasons. And then, quite honestly, I was always a little bit more afraid. It just felt so uncomfortable for me. I think we've joked about this. Like, if you want to make me wig out and feel very uncomfortable, just tell me there's going to be dancing involved, number one. And then number two, tell me it's going to be a party. Even if it's friends of mine I know very well, it's going to be, if it's more than 10, 12 people, if you say it's going to be, if you call it a party, I don't care who's there, I'm going to be kind of like, right? And if you say there's going to be dancing too, now it's like, how can I find my way out of this? Yes. And if you say there's going to be alcohol too, and it's people we don't know, and it's going to be a party with alcohol, then I'm like,
I'm not going.
Yeah, right.
I'm not going.
Growing up, I just wasn't there, but a lot of it's because of social anxiety. So anyway, long story short is it took me a long time before I even got familiar with wine. And I still now, I just don't like white wine. I don't. So I drink some white wine here and there, but I still don't like beer of any kind. Guinness, I just don't like any of that. So I don't know. It's just what it is.
I think maybe a lot of people might feel that way, that they've never enjoyed it, that it's just maybe, this is my awareness that it's so incredibly socially accepted and normal that we just confine to that norm. That's the way I felt for a long time. I can't speak for everybody else, but I can't be, in the conversations that I have, half of them go where people are very intrigued by it and want to learn more about it. And that conversation always blooms, right? Like
learn more about
like alcohol, or just be awoken to how socially normal it is, yet maybe it's never served them. Maybe they've never had that conversation. But the conversations that I'm in over many years are always, it's always a 50-50. People are inspired and want to have the conversation. And then I always feel like a lot of my conversations are, there's something wrong with me.
With you?
Yeah, like, why don't you drink? It's usually, are you pregnant? Right? That's a question that a lot of people ask.
I don't get
women.
that question.
If you're not drinking, typically as a woman, somebody might ask you,
sure.
Are you pregnant?
Yeah.
That's 9 out of 10 times. Yeah. That's probably the first question.
Do you get the question about, is it because you've decided you need to be sober?
Yeah. Sure. That's usually, it's not as forward as that, because that's a very bold question to ask somebody. Are you sober, or do you have a problem with it? It's always a feeling. It's always something that kind of comes along with the conversation. It's sometimes I actually even play into it a little bit. I'm always, not that I'm stretching my truth at all, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, it's never served me. And in all the situations that I've put myself in, when it is around alcohol, I always feel like something has gone sideways a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, and what does that look like? Yeah, I've been in a lot of situations where there's alcohol or drugs involved, where things have gone sideways. Things have not been, it hasn't been a good night, whatever it is. You know what I mean? There's a million examples I could give you.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because it makes me reflect on part of that. Like I say, for me personally, the discomfort that I have with it, and I'm remembering now on emotionally about one of the reasons it feels so uncomfortable for me around other people. It's not a judgy thing. It's more, but why do I feel uncomfortable even if I'm not drinking or whatever? It has nothing to do with me. Why is it a little uncomfortable for me? Because we've all had experiences where something goes a little awry, right? Or for me, it's just like it's not who they are. It doesn't seem when the person I'm with or people I'm with, and it gets beyond a certain threshold, and then they're out of character. It just feels weird to me, and I don't know how to describe it. It's not that I have an issue with the person or people. It just feels I don't know.
I think it's always had something to do with a little bit of control, right?
I don't know how to act around them.
Right. I agree.
I don't know how to act.
I agree. Over the last 10 years that I was ill and I have taken alcohol out of my life completely, it really has shown me when I am, because I'm still continuously in social settings. It's just in a different way. I'm showing up in a different way. I'm so highly alert. I'm so clear in what I see and not what I think is, I guess, I don't want to say normal, but I know I'm just so clear in my body, I guess, when I'm in social settings. And so when I see things happening around me, I'm not being judgmental of it. I'm just so highly aware. And so I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I think that's what happens when, when we talk about things going sideways or people acting or doing things, it's like, I'm so aware of that. I see all of it. And so I tend to, yes, I've removed myself from a lot of social settings where I know alcohol is going to be really present. And I've done events because I always feel a little uncomfortable. So I don't always put myself in those situations anymore.
Not because you're the outlier.
Right.
Not because of that.
Right. Exactly.
So there's some kind of similarity, I think, that we experienced there. I mean, to back up just a little bit for me, so it was only probably in the last less than 5 years or so that I started trying even more hard liquors. So I've decided, I realized, oh, actually, I like margaritas. I remember realizing I like sangrias. Okay, red wine, right? And then at some point, it was something where it was probably like roughly once a week. I would actually look for an opportunity, on a weekend or whatever, with dinner or whatever. It was family. It wasn't anything meaningful. It's just like one drink, right? But I enjoyed it. Okay. And then at some point, I started to observe that, as you know, it's 6 a.m. Saturday morning basketball. I started questioning and observing with more confidence with several observations that it's just not the same on Saturday morning. I'm not, it's just one drink. Okay. I'm a lightweight, but it's just one drink. It's not like I feel differently. I mean, maybe I feel a little bit, my head's not quite as clear, but that night on Friday night, but it just was like, it's not worth it. In the same way that you say about serving, really having interest in that affecting Saturday morning as little as it is. Cause I'm no star or anything. Like I just didn't like the experience. So then I started looking at Saturday night instead of Friday night. Right. But then after some point, and I don't remember why, I was just like, I just don't know there's value. And I think some of it, and I think this is a good next talking point, perhaps somewhere here is, there's been a lot more stuff in research and news, and then the general surgeon and et cetera, about, hey, even little amounts can have a negative effect. And then as we talk especially about brain health and all this stuff, and I hear more and more people as patients talking about it. And I have more and more patients turning to me that they're trying to reduce, cut back, or they're thinking about the topic. And I think we've bantered about that just a little bit. So then it's funny, our brick and mortar office staff got me a one of those home machines to like make your own cocktails. And I was like so excited about that. And then like 3/4 year later, I was like, I barely use this. Yeah. It just kind of organically evolved that way. And so now it's not like I purposely don't at all, but it's pretty rare. And I'm kind of more mindful about it I don't think I'm doing that much damage to my brain just because of this, but it's still in my mind to kind of go, I don't even know if I need this.
Just reflecting on what you just said about waking up on Saturday mornings and being a little bit foggy, or recognizing that that's how it was making you feel. I can remember that so distinctly. It resonates so deeply. When I had Jackson 19 years ago, I can remember kids don't care what happened the night before. If you had a drink or whatever, they're waking up at 6 a.m. and they're looking you up in the eyes and just, they need their mom. Right. And I can remember so distinctly feeling like tired on and off, obviously lack of sleep with a newborn. But I can also remember if I did have a drink or two, I would wake up even more tired. And I can just remember looking at Jack and Reese when they were little, and I didn't want to give them a tired mom. You know what I mean? That's something it was more important to me to give them a mom that was lacking sleep and rest and all the things. But like, I wanted to give them the best form of me.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I was like treading very lightly with, deciding whether I was going to have a drink or not at any point, socially or not socially, when the kids were young. It was like, I wanted to wake up and be the best mom that I could be. So full of energy. And so it's like, when you want to wake up, basketball is very important to you. Those Saturday mornings you've been doing for 15 years or you've been doing it for a long time. It's something that you enjoy and it's important to you. And so you want to show up in your best way. That's something how I felt when I had children. I was like, yeah, this has got to go, because this is altering how I'm showing up for my kids in the morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I wanted them to have a mom that was, again, full of energy and ready to go. And then 10 years ago, just going back to that, anything that was making me feel less than, it was like, it had to go. So that was like kind of like a defining moment for me, and something that I'm actually proud of. I feel confident talking about it. And, because it was a health crisis, and with health crisis, things change. And so that was one of the things that changed. And it was a very easy change, because again, it wasn't a huge part of my life, but yeah, I needed to give myself a fighting chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anything that was contributing to the opposite of that had to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was something that happened 10 years ago. But just to touch upon real quickly, this conversation that we're having, I'm having it a lot with a lot of different people. But yeah, in the news, there's a lot of information on social media. There's a lot of information about sobriety, a lot of people talking about it. And it's really enlightening to me. And it's really inspiring.
Yeah, so it's perfect timing, because I was thinking the same thing. If we bring it back to, okay, these are our personal experiences, but why are we talking about it again? Like, what's the point for, why is it a big enough deal that we decided to make this a discussion today? And so, so there's a couple of those talking points for your point of perspective. I'm still, in my mind, wondering, like, how, to be almost a little bit of devil's advocate, or challenging, like, why is it, either why does it come up so often for you, or why even it comes up, but why is it such a meaningful topic for you to say, yeah, let's talk about this topic?
Because I think, just me personally, cutting it out of my life, or having it really at bay all those years, and then truly being, sober the last 10 years, I'm just so clear-eyed. It's like, I understand it. And I've been around it enough to see how socially accepted it is and how people utilize it. So we have teenagers, and we talked about whether we wanted to share about that. But like, I have a teenage son that is highly exposed to it through college and through high school. It's just right in front of me. I have a sister who's been sober for 9 years, and she's sober because she had a serious issue with it. So it's something that's kind of at every perimeter of my life.
So here to be a little challenging.
Yes.
Because off camera and such, we've talked about that, hey, there's no intention for you or I, individually or collectively, to, it's not like there's an agenda here. It's not, there isn't a message here of, we're trying to passively aggressively push people to not drink.
Right.
That's not the point here.
No.
That's not the point. So if that's not the point, is it just that interesting and reflective for you that it's such an anti-establishment or anti-norm to not drink? Or is it more, what is the end message for any given number of people who might be listening, right? Saying, is it, hey, for me, it just, any little bit that can make I can get more juice out of my squeeze in life. That's what I experienced. And hey, I think other people, you might be thinking, and I'm just not hearing it yet, you might be thinking or experiencing, I've had enough conversations with other people where I'm seeing them also decide, not because I'm trying to suggest it or push it or encourage it, but they've decided also to cut back or stop. And I'm observing that they're also getting more juice out of their squeeze in life, right? Or is it more just the fact, is it just literally, this has just been an interesting experience for me, and I just find it fascinating that it's so rare that someone like me I'm the only person out of 300 people at a frat party or whatever, or, just in social gatherings. And it's just fascinating as a sociologic observation? Or is it more like, I wonder how many more people might be having a similar experience, but not willing for any, or ready for whatever number of reasons to take further steps? Or maybe something else?
Yeah, I think it's all of those.
Oh, all right. Then.
I think it's all of those. Yeah, it is. This conversation that I'm having with you, I have so many times. So it's something that I am a little bit passionate about. I see it on every perimeter of my life. So why not speak it out loud? Why not have a conversation and share it with a bigger community? I think
there's a question. Why is it so passionate? Why are you so passionate about it?
Because it's something that was in my personal life. I'm witnessing my son experiment with alcohol, and now my daughter, who are both teenagers and high schoolers. So it's just for a mother, that's extremely frightening. I've been there, done that. So it's also like I come from a place of non-judgment of anybody for anything. I have a sister who's not only very close in age with me, she's my bestest, dearest friend. And so I've watched her battle for many years and now come on the other side of it, which is like in the most inspiring story. We always say like, I've gone through so much with her. I'm 45 years old. She's 40, maybe 47. She's lived like 10 lives and this life that she has now, 9 years sober, is so drastically different than the lives that she had before. And it is so fruitful, so beautiful. And it's so inspiring. And this is someone who had a real issue with alcohol. And so I look at myself and I say, oh my God, I feel so much clearer, better. And I know I know that's a contributor. I know it is. And then I look at her and I'm like, oh God, like her fruitful life that maybe she never, or we never knew she would even have is just, oh my God, I wish that for anybody that deals with maybe a substance abuse issue, right? Like you wish that for everybody. You pray for that. That's something I prayed for my entire life for her. So to see that come to fruition, maybe not through my prayers or just through her own choices and God's path for her has been like, it's just incredible. And so like when I say I have it on every perimeter of my life and why do I want to talk about it? Jesus, it's something that I'm having conversations about it. I see it in my personal life through family, through my children. And it's like, yeah, I like this conversation. I'm not afraid of this conversation.
Sure.
And I'm excited for the thought that it could inspire and help someone else.
So that's what I heard just now, right? I'm asking, why are you so passionate about this, right? Because it's not a huge deal. It's not like you personally went through a dark journey with alcohol and then are here now. It's not like your Lyme story, where it's like this was overwhelming and controlling me, and then here I am on the other side. It's not that,
Right.
But you've nonetheless seen someone you're very close with go through that. And then what I'm hearing more further is because you're a very vivacious person. You love life, right? And I hear that holy crap, you can get that extra squeeze, not even extra, but you can get just even the squeeze out of the juice out of that squeeze with this one topic. You've seen it enough, not just with your sister, but no doubt other people. And that's where I relate with this also, that for you and I, who, if we're passionate about life, or when we're passionate about people, and we're passionate about the potential within each individual, and maybe the wiring, the gifting, the missional purpose for any given individual, much less collectively. And if that can be unearthed and brought to the forefront, and the authentic or full potential of that individual can now be unleashed, all of a sudden that's what I'm hearing. I could definitely connect with you both personally and to the degree I know you, that is something that you find an amazing, not just stimulating, that's too trivial, fueling to just witness in somebody else, not even just yourself.
I think over the last 10 years, there's been such a shift with in reflecting on the shift so much in the last 2 years that I've been feeling better and well. And what are the contributors to me feeling well? And then looking at just everything in my life and the people in my life that are also on the path of clarity, enlightenment, right? Like getting the squeeze out of life, like living life to the fullest and feeling good, feeling well, like living long, like all these conversations that you and I are having. And now we're just, like getting a little bit more in depth with it. But the conversation about alcohol to me is like, it's such a social norm. And it is at the top of what is socially normal out of everything that people do in the world,
so.
right? Like there's so many.
As far as my considered vices or something that's a little more.
Right. I do feel like it's at the top of the pyramid, but what is so socially normal. And I'm not judging anybody for something, that they're choosing to do in their lives that serves them or doesn't serve them. It's such a personal topic.
Yeah.
But I do think once you kind of bring down the veil a little bit and have these conversations, it'd be really inspiring about having a conversation about alcohol and having people just reflect on it a little bit more. Does it serve me? Is it fruitful? Like, I don't know what's my relationship with it. Those are personal reflections that I've had. I've witnessed my sister having them. And on the other side of it, it's just, there's clarity I just know it.
Yeah.
I'm just so clear thinking all the time.
So here, one of the two missional foundations for the podcast, right, is to talk. So we talk about the reality of functional medicine, and we kind of go, okay, well, what does alcohol have to do with that? Well, because functional medicine isn't just about physiologic and biologic health; it's very much behavioral health as well. There's a huge mental, emotional piece to our health. I mean, I could argue that it's more important than I've always said. Emotional health takes precedent over physical health. A diabetic who is severely diabetic, who's depressed enough, does not care if they're treating their diabetes, right? And so there's the tie-in, right? There's the good, the bad, the ugly of life in general, functional medicine specifically. But in this case, as we're talking about self-awareness, which is a huge piece of our health journeys, our life journeys, okay? We can tie this in and say alcohol can be, hey, it's not just, we're not casting it just as a sort of bad guy in a shadow per se, right? We're not necessarily making value assessments on this. We're saying you've had an experience, and I've had an experience in a kind of more trivial way with basketball. I mean, like, it's not that huge of a deal, okay? But we've had experiences where, hey, we're self-aware enough to go, from you, even from teenage years, which is not common, right? Doesn't quite serve me. Don't really feel that awesome. Doing this kind of more out of social, not even pressures, just to fit in, right? But how much is it worth it to me, right? And that's where everybody's going to differ, right? Because we have different, how much do we feel we need to fit in? Some people don't feel need at all, rarely, but most of us do on some level, because we would like to be accepted. We like to be liked and loved, right? And so then it's, well, how much is that necessary to feel that way, right? And that's a whole nother topic. But my mind now goes to, well, why do some of us, and I guess we don't have to go that way in this direction for you, but from my observations professionally, as you just said, this is maybe one of the top societal sort of norms. And beyond the fact that I'm sure you've had this conversation with your own kids as well, like we talk a lot about how much would this not be such a big deal if we had laws that were different, like in Europe. The age thing, part of it just in our society, in my opinion, because it's taboo, because we're humans, right? If you're not supposed to, then we kind of want to, right? If you're supposed to, then we kind of don't want to. Don't tell me what to do, especially in America. I'm independent. Don't tell me what to do. And if you tell me not to do it, I kind of want to do it. And then there's also the whole, I mean, again, not to be judged at all, but I know from personal and observational experience over and over and over, Catholicism is a huge part of our history culturally. And historically, there's a lot of people who have a feeling of law, sort of more rigidity, or do this, don't do that, right? In all kinds of religious and other spiritual, whatever, other kind of frameworks, but especially in that regard. And so again, if it wasn't made to be that big a deal, would it be that big of a deal, especially in the teenage years? Good question, right? But fast forwarding, if we go into adulthood, right? Why does it continue to be a thing for some people more than others, but in general in society, where it's a very big it's a big central part of social events, of weekend activities and whatever else. And I'll just wind all that down into saying, I always go back to this conversation of we all tend to self-medicate. In my opinion, we all self-medicate on some level with something. Alcohol tends to be really common. Hey, these days, marijuana, maybe that's for another time. That's super common too. But it can also be eating. It could be shopping. It could be doom scrolling, as the kids like to call it now, right? Doom scrolling. I mean, even adults, and you will use that term now. Just vegging out, right? Video games, whatever it is, we tend to numb out a bit with something, right? Part of that's just life. It can be stressful,
right?
Okay, and so there's the question. Where the question on land here is to say, what do you think about either by personal experience or observations of others you feel safe talking about when you talk about, hey, I feel clear. I feel clear, and I'm myself. What about, have you ever had an experience yourself? Let's start there, where you didn't like to be yourself, where, there's a little bit of a compare contrast to say, because there's an inherent piece there for me where you like life clean and clear. But I know many patients who they don't like life because it's too painful or it's too stressful. That's the whole point. I'm trying to escape. And that's what I mean by the self-medicating part. And so it's not to say, what do you say, or what do I say to someone? Okay, I'm in that position a lot as a doctor, but I know that's not something you're having discussions about. Going back to this whole thing about the conversations you have a lot. I know you're not having a conversation going like, have you ever thought about, or you should, that's not you.
Right.
That's not you.
Right.
And so I'm just curious more first, have you observed or been in conversations where somebody has outright just said, That's the whole point, right, Joe? Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to,
Mhm.
I kind of want to get away from that for a bit.
Mhm. It's funny in conversations, I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm in so many of these conversations and that does never come up, but it has come up specifically with my sister
Okay.
because I've walked alongside her through so many different things in her life with substance. And now that she's on the other side of it and sober, that is something that she has outright said. Yeah, I wanted to escape
Sure.
what was her she's got a very beautiful mind and it doesn't stop. And so that was like using substance was the only thing that would make it stop. It was the only way she would be able to fall asleep at night or pass out at night. So she has specifically shared those things with me, which are very personal. She's actually writing a book right now, which I'm very proud of her for. I'm on a lot of topics,
Okay.
but yeah, this is probably the thread that goes through all of it. But yeah, that is something that just personally I've experienced with her in conversation about why she utilizes it. It's I have never felt that way that I want to escape anything.
Mm.
And so I don't know if that's a privilege or something that, in my personal life that I haven't had I've had hard things, but not really hard things that have, I've utilized substance and to escape but in my sister's instance, yes, that is something that she has shared pretty forthcoming that's the only way that she could turn
Sure.
things off. And, we should have her on the podcast sometimes because she's got a lot.
That's
She's
really
got a lot to
fascinating.
say about it, but in her perspective is completely different than mine. Her lived experience is completely different than mine. That's why it's super hard to touch upon or judge or think very much about everybody's personal experiences because they're just so different. I mean, I grew up under the same house with the same parents, went through all the same schooling, was on all the same sports teams as her. Yet we are two totally, completely different people and have two completely different lived experiences. And when we talk about the alcohol topic, what she shares about it is so much more in depth than what I can say. How it has served her.
Yeah.
And how it has eventually not served her.
Yeah.
And it eventually has brought her to an incredibly fruitful life, which is fascinating.
Yes. Because when, in this whole functional medicine world, people are always talking about root cause.
Mhm.
And I love talking about root cause of mental health stuff.
Mhm.
Okay. When people talk about like, who doesn't talk about being anxious,
Right.
stressed all the time, right?
Right.
Anxious, depressed, whatever. The kids these days,
Mhm.
our kids, they use those terms loosely, right? I mean, kids are commonly saying like my anxiety, my depression, and they don't really mean legit like dysfunctional anxiety. Okay.
Right.
But they use these terms all the time, right? And I'm always thinking about, okay, so first level, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, okay? But I'm always thinking first level. So is this a circumstantial driven thing, or is this a total I don't want to say just chemical thing, but effectively that's what people understand. They understand what I'm saying. Like it doesn't add up, right? Why do I feel anxious all the time, and I really don't have legit like strong things to be anxious about, right? That's a different story, right? And that goes into the whole alcohol thing where I like I said, we self-medicate. I self-medicate, right? It's just not with alcohol. Like I know when my on the Sundays when my phone says your screen time has blah 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, I have been playing too much of the Toon Blast, right? Because like I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I just need to numb out, right? There's better ways I could, I could meditate or whatever, but it's hard. I mean, I'm no different than anybody else. I don't know about you, but it's not easy to do things that are more. Sometimes it's not easy to do what I know is better for me. It's just easier just to numb out and play Toon Blast.
Right. And when you share the short list or maybe a little bit of a longer list of the things that we self-medicate, with, whether it's doom scrolling or substance or like I always am like, oh God, yeah, I have my things. Are you kidding me? And we can talk about those on the next episode. We can talk about doomsday scrolling because I absolutely do that. We can talk about like shopping addictions. We can talk about all the things that, like that we self-medicate with. Yeah, there's an array of things. And we talk about the pyramid. It does feel like socially like alcohol might be at the top, but they're hand in hand with many others that are right there too. Sure. And yeah, I do think when we have this conversation, it all ties back into like an emotional health, right? And awareness and having that conversation on like, why do we do these things? And what are the things that we self-medicating with that are extremely harmful to our health? Contradicting it, like how we're trying to live, right? Like how destructive they can be for our physical health, our mental health, how destructive they can be for our family, our friends, our relationships. Like it's such a huge conversation. I'm interested in it and I'm passionate about it because it is, again, it's in a lot of avenues of my life.
But again, in my opinion, it comes back down, my observations, again, comes down a lot to self-awareness, right? Because it's not usually a sudden overnight change.
Right.
And so it's a gradual change, as with many things in life. And then once we're in it, it's hard to see the forest from the trees until bad things happen.
Right.
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 And that's when all of a sudden, okay, well, you're so deep in the hole commonly. Yeah. Going back to that for me, that came out of hearing you talk about your sister, because I have seen a number of people who come to awareness, self-awareness, that either oh yeah, I'm just self-medicating really effectively, right? That's my de-stressor. And it's nice to feel just more free and disinhibited, whatever. And that makes me think about plant-based medicine, all right? Psilocybin and stuff like that. That's been in the news recently too. Positive research ways, okay? Another time. But, and I've had more and more patients doing that now, okay? And with my, not just support, sometimes suggestion,
Right.
okay? Another time. But also there are people who they're self-medicating, like significant anxiety or ADD even. Okay. I've had a number of people who come to realize I have, as you want, however defined clinically, ADD, ADHD, and that's driving this like secondary anxiety also. And then life is just so disorganized or whatever, and I was just so struggling, and then like I just need to escape it. And then once they like address that in whatever way it is, whether it's prescription medication, whether it's coaching, it's combinations or whatever, better life support structures, life rhythms, whatever, all of a sudden like, yeah, the alcohol's not such a big deal. And it's not even a fight, like it's not that they're going sober per se, but it's just not an issue. I could take it, I could leave it. And for me, I think what I, on the tail end of what we said earlier about you, my suggestion to you, that what I hear from you is, I love to see people's potentials come out. I love to see like life be at its fullest, not just for me, but for other people. For me, I love, in the same regard as a shade of gray there, I love to see people like be able to break free and be free, to be free of something that just, as you kind of alluded to this, it just isn't, I'm not a servant of that something else. Sometimes it's a mild level, sometimes it's a severe level, but man, freedom is, I think it's a human thing. People value freedom. And that's beautiful to me.
When you talk about root cause and kind of getting to like that next level of why, right? Like, that's such an interesting conversation, because, you as a doctor, it's like, you probably have those conversations and knowledge around all of that. But just you simply sharing it right now, it's like, I kind of have a little bit of knowledge of that. And that makes all the sense. Like the root cause of something, we got to take it, like, we got to peel it back 10 layers before we get to the actual reason of why we're doing it, right? Which ties into mental health in the conversation that you're talking about. But I'm not even sure that conversation is really predominant right now. Like even just hearing you say that's a conversation that I think is incredibly interesting. Like you might think you're doing this because of this, but let's peel it back. Like maybe it's not 10 layers. Maybe it's just like one layer at a time to address what the real issue is, which potentially could be something. I mean, it could be anything, right? But that when I think about all the different situations that I've been in, specifically, I always kind of go back to my sister. It's like the root cause of what she's gone through all these years is something that's being identified like in current day right now.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's what keeps life. I mean, not to minimize that,
yes,
right? I mean, that's what for me keeps life so interesting, because there used to be a guy in town. We've never talked about him. He's moved years ago now, but I've always found him to be so almost overly reflective, and not in a negative way, but just it was so challenging for me because he was so present, overly present, right? And it really interesting gentleman, but just he always made me like this. He would ground me into life, just not purposely, intentionally. It's just like by him. Just his presence and the way he would talk about things with his own experiences, so grounding, right? And it would make me realize that with these, how I would always, even now, regularly with patients, when we talk about root cause, right? Because it's almost an overused term. In social media, anyone's tapping into healthcare stuff, on social media, it's all over the place. Yeah. What's the root cause? But there's different depths of root cause. Self-awareness, like I've always said, even that gentleman I'm talking about, he's always said, and I know it because he's always talking about people who are even more grounded and present and meditated than him. We're never going to run out of depth of self-awareness. I mean, you could be 99 years old, and if you're putting effort into it, there is more depth of self-awareness to be discovered. It's a bottomless pit. Now, some people, like I said before, they're not interested. Or they don't want to go down that road. And that's a whole nother fascinating thing for me. Why?
Right.
Because it's not always like a trauma thing. Right. Is it just a wiring? It's just an internal alignment thing that I don't care to know, or I don't want, like, I'm afraid of myself, or I'm afraid of the depth of humanity. And I don't know, right? That gets deep. But commonly, I do think that's an issue where number one, it goes down either side. One is I don't want to or don't like going down that road for various reasons. And that's unfortunate because trauma and stuff like that of that nature is not easy to keep unscabbing.
Right.
Okay. But on the other side of the coin, how many people, like you were describing, have enough of an experience at some point that, wow, there's a deeper level of self-awareness that I feel aligned with, and it's a positive feeding to make me want to even do it more. If we haven't even experienced that on some degree, then it's hard to keep incite that. But once you experience it, if you're a person who you do want to get the most out of life and you do appreciate being more aligned with yourself, that's so fueling to me. It is like the juice of life to me. Okay. 'Cause the root cause thing with mental health is almost endless. It can be fascinating from an academic perspective or just sociological, whatever. But if you're a person who really wants to, again, get the most out of life for yourself and just tap the untapped potential, that's a bottomless pit.
I always go back to one of our first conversations where I was really in a health crisis. Personally, this health crisis forced me to suffer, and suffering brings you to a lot of things. One of them specifically is enlightenment, right? And I would never say I'm the most enlightened person. But yeah, that suffering for so long brought me to healing, brought me to a lot of things. And enlightenment and what comes from that is something that I just want to continue with for the rest of my life. I just want more enlightenment. I want more knowledge. I want more awareness. I
love that term that you brought up just again.
Yeah.
You brought it before, but I love that in this moment.
I do feel like when people go through really hard things, there's blocks. And this is something that is maybe ties into the mental health conversation. Like I don't know if people are blocked off from it. They're hurt so badly or they're suffering so badly. And so they're turned off, right? I always feel like, I have another person that's very close in my life that I feel like she's gone through so much and she's hardened by it. Right. And so how does she, take that next step into healing and enlightenment and root cause and all these conversations that we're having that will take her to peace and all these things that like in her life that could be on the other side of that. But it's like it can be to get to enlightenment and all these things, it's like sometimes you can't even get over the hump of life is hard.
No, it is
really hard.
Yeah. It's an interesting connection to think about, that, in your first 3 chapters in the sessions, we talked about the pain and struggle you've had on a physical health level. Right. And that's something that, as you know, and maybe more now than you did a few months ago, there's a lot of people who've gone through something of that sort. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's journey is different, but there's some similarities.
But how things can be so hard that they can really shut people up. I mean, I can speak to it because of personal experience about alcohol. And I do really enjoy hearing other people talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I think it can be inspiring. It might feel negative for a lot of people to have the conversation because of everybody's own personal journey with it,
That's a good, that's a good down spot there. I mean, I was kind of challenging us to narrow in on, okay, what's the real message here, right?
Yeah, just to wind it up, I do feel like, having this conversation with you, I enjoy, as weird as that might sound, I enjoy having a conversation about alcohol because it is a part of my life in different aspects.
Isn't that funny? No,
Yeah.
I don't really enjoy alcohol itself, but I enjoy talking about alcohol.
Yes,
That is unusual.
It is unusual, but it is true.
And you're not even a therapist.
And I enjoy talking about it, listening to people talk about it. Inspiring in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's like taking a veil down from something that, is just so normal, yet isn't really normal and doesn't feel really great in my personal life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like saying that out loud. It's freeing for me. And maybe it could be freeing for somebody else. Maybe it can be inspiring or enlightening for someone else. I don't know.
Yeah.
I always feel like hope that's my foundational hope for these conversations is that maybe it could inspire someone else in a positive way in their own personal life. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it triggers some people because I think it can do that too. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't personally, I don't think about or haven't experienced the triggering of it. I mean, this conversation, as I alluded to before, it has come up for me more often. It feels like subjectively, it feels like I'm not keeping data or whatever, but in the last half year, maybe year. It feels like it has been
Mhm.
coming up more often. I
Mhm.
think as a result of various media and social media influences, and I think it's a positive thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm with you. I love. I think you and I are the same. A lot of our intention in our conversations, obviously, is to, especially as we shifted more now from your personal story and that it's the enormity of that, now shifting into other conversations of
Mhm.
discussion, right? And a lot of that's still going to be personal experience related, maybe not as heavy and
Mhm.
deep, but in many other aspects that we share with many other people in society. But ultimately, our intentions are to provide inspiration slash hope,
Mhm.
right? In some kind of way or another.
Mhm.
And then number two is to, well, because I mean, that's the whole message for me with your first telling your own story about your Lyme journey,
Mhm.
right? There is hope, right? And yeah, I think that goes a long way. I think there's so much value in that, especially in this day and age.
I knew you just,
Hope.
I don't want to bring it back so much, but I know you just mentioned in the past like year or so, the conversation is coming up for you, but you just being a doctor and talking to patients
Yeah.
on a regular basis and just your own knowledge around the topic. It's probably been a conversation with a lot of patients, right? Alcohol use or anything like that. Not, I don't know that for sure, but like, is that something that when people that you have that conversation with patients?
Yeah.
Not like in depth about alcohol specifically.
Sometimes in depth, but yeah, you're asking just like what those conversations look like.
Yeah, or just, what would be, I guess, like, I always feel like when you're at the doctor's, it's the first question is always like, do you drink? How much do you drink? There's always these questions when you're at a doctor's office, like filling out the forms about how much you drink, do you smoke, and all these. I'm always like curious on, if that's a conversation when you're talking to patients.
We don't have forms with
Yeah.
those specific questions. I think we try to cover so much. I'm thinking more about like physicals, and
Mm.
our office is a little different, so the visits are longer, and so we get into some pretty good length about things or depth about things.
Mm.
I think it's just in one way or another, whether it's about the like sleep difficulties
Mhm.
or anxiety, depression, life function, brain fog. I
Mhm.
mean, the alcohol topic can come up easily, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
nowadays, that's just the newer bent is, hey, when we're talking about longevity medicine, right? And anti-aging longevity, et cetera, and the quality of life, length of life, et cetera, it comes up easily there too,
Mhm.
right? And it's
Mhm.
not even of my own initiating of that conversation. People bring it up to me. That's a little bit of a newer phenomenon,
Mhm.
but it's cool, right? And it's not a value judgment thing. Again, it's just, like you say, I haven't used those terms. It's not how my thinking or wording is, but like, are you, does it serve you?
Mhm.
How does it serve you, et cetera, and how much,
Mhm.
et cetera. But I think they're good conversations, right? And I think that's a lot of your intention, our intention is to, we could say raise awareness, but at
Mhm.
the deeper than that would be to either maybe self-awareness, create more self-awareness, challenge ourselves to have more self-awareness, to know there's hope, or to perhaps inspire anybody to tap into those directions,
Mhm.
right? To
Mhm.
then perpetuate and positively fuel those directions where we just get more juice out of the squeeze in life
Mhm.
because we're only living this life once.
Mhm.
Fair?
Very fair.
That's good. That's cool.
I appreciate you having this conversation with me.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel
It's
like
good
we
stuff.
could talk for a couple more hours about this too.
Yeah, we have to
Maybe there'll
find it.
be a part two.
Yeah, we got to find a point to just
Yeah.
call it a close. But yeah, a few other cans of worms that we open there that we might explore later. But so yeah, this may not be directly as related to a lot of the past conversations we've had already about yourself with Lyme disease and other more common or frequent stereotypical quote unquote functional medicine topics, but it is certainly an an insight into that root cause goes beyond the more typical topics we hear about in social media and otherwise. It goes into behavioral health, certainly. A lot of stuff we try to bring all that to the table whenever we can within the time and energy and capacity and to much the degree that patients will allow us to. So again, if you're looking for some extra help in your health journey in whatever kind of way, it could be physically, it could be mentally, emotionally, etc. RootSeekHealth.com is where you can find our practice. We'd be privileged and honored to step into or help walk in that journey with you. And otherwise, we'll look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. Thanks, Mary Jo.
Thanks, everyone.